We now come to the Select Committee's statement on behalf of the Joint Committee on Human Rights. Peter Swallow will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions will be taken, and at the conclusion of his statement I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions, not speeches. Can I emphasise that questions must be directed to the Select Committee member and not the relevant government minister, and front benchers may take part in questioning. I call Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to present to the House the Joint Committee on Human Rights report into the Mental Health Bill. As members will know, the Joint Committee is a cross-party body of both houses, chaired by Lord Alton of Liverpool, whose remit is to examine matters relating to human rights within the UK, including through legislative scrutiny. Over the course of our inquiry into the bill, we have examined legal frameworks, witness submissions and, crucially, the voices of those with direct experience of the mental health system. As part of our inquiry, the committee convened a roundtable with individuals who had experienced detention under the Mental Health Act. Their testimonies were powerful, candid and often harrowing. They spoke of the trauma of being sectioned, the overuse of medication and restraint, and the disempowerment of being detained in facilities that too often felt isolating rather than therapeutic. Participants have since shared with us how important this visibility was to them, to see their evidence truly listened to and shared publicly. Hearing directly from people with lived experience was not just informative, it was essential. These conversations grounded our scrutiny in the realities faced by patients and families, and the insights shared at that roundtable shaped our thinking and sharpened our final recommendations. As one participant told us, lived experience matters. Using it to inform policy should be the standard, not a shock. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who contributed to the roundtable, often at the cost of revisiting past trauma. The committee is also grateful for the expert work of the committee's legal counsel, particularly Alex Gast, who led on this work, as well as Tiago Simões Froio and Hafsa Said, who led on the delivery of the roundtable event. What became clear over the course of our scrutiny is just how overdue the Mental Health Bill is. It will introduce substantial changes to the Mental Health Act, which provides the legal framework for the detention and compulsory treatment of people with mental disorders, an outdated term, but one that still remains part of our law. The changes introduced by the bill will bring our mental health legislation into the 21st century, strengthen patient rights, and help end practices which bring more harm than good. When people hear about detention under the Mental Health Act, many instinctively think of those who have committed the most serious and violent crimes. They picture high-security hospitals like Broadmoor, which happens to be located in my own constituency of Bracknell. I've had the opportunity to visit Broadmoor. The work they do there is outstanding. It's vital, world-leading work that deals with some of the most complex and challenging cases in psychiatric medicine. But let us be clear, the reality of detention under the Mental Health Act is not limited to high-security hospitals or individuals convicted of serious crimes. Many people detained under the current Mental Health Act are not criminals. Many of them are children, young people, and adults with autism or learning disabilities who are detained not because they pose a danger to others, but because the support they need in their communities simply isn't there. This isn't just inefficient, it can often be deeply traumatising and raises significant human rights concerns. That's why the committee welcomes the major changes introduced by the government's bill. The bill will end the detention of individuals under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act solely on the basis that they are autistic or have a learning disability, tighten the criteria for detention, requiring decision makers to consider the nature, degree and likelihood of harm before deciding to detain, introduce the concept of a nominated person to replace the outdated nearest relative system, and it will remove police stations and prisons as places of safety for individuals in crisis. As stated in the evidence we receive from witnesses, these are important, welcomed and long-awaited reforms. They reflect the breadth of the government's consultations in this area and prove that the government has listened to the information it received. While welcoming the bill's direction of travel, the committee believes there are areas in which the government could go even further to provide enhanced protection for human rights. That's why we have recommended a few key amendments based on the evidence we received during the inquiry. First, we recommend a new clause to ensure that children detained under the Mental Health Act are only accommodated on adult wards where it is demonstrably in their best interests. Second, we recommend an amendment to Clause 1 to include equity as a fifth guiding principle under the Act. This principle would refer specifically to addressing inequalities in treatments and outcomes, particularly on racial grounds. And I welcome the fact that the Health Secretary, in the debate on the second reading on Monday, recognised that, to quote, people from ethnic minority communities, especially Black African and Caribbean men, are more than 3 times likely to be sectioned. Our report found that adding this guiding principle of equity to the Act would do more to address this racial disparity. Third, we recommend an amendment to Clause 32 to shorten the review periods for restricted patients who are discharged into conditions amounting to the deprivation of liberty. The first review would be required within 6 months rather than 12, and subsequent reviews would take place annually rather than every 2 years. These key amendments come amidst a range of other recommendations. Recent case law has shown that mental health patients in state-commissioned and funded but privately provided care do not come with the protection of the Human Rights Act. This is a loophole which needs to be closed, and we recommend for the government to do just that. We also heard evidence that the question of when the Mental Health Act and when the Mental Capacity Act should govern a patient's deprivation of liberty and treatment is far too complex, raising human rights concerns not least because depriving a person of their liberty on any grounds can only be justified if the legal basis is clear. We therefore recommend that the government carry out an urgent review and provide clarity that is lacking on this issue. Another crucial area covered by this bill is the rights of children who are particularly vulnerable when assessed or treated under the Mental Health Act. Many of the proposed changes to the law would be positive for children, including the introduction of an opt-out approach to receiving report from independent mental health advocates. We recommend, however, that the government consult on introducing a statutory test for assessing whether under 16-year-olds are competent to consent or refuse consent to treatment, a cornerstone of compliance with a child's human rights. What the committee also deems vital is that prisoners whose mental health makes them unsuitable for being held in prison are transferred promptly to appropriate settings. Keeping them in prison may result in human rights breaches. The report therefore welcomes the bill's introduction of a statutory 28-day timeframe for hospital transfers, and relevant data should be collected and made available to monitor and help ensure compliance with this standard. Madam Deputy Speaker, the committee also welcomes changes to restriction orders placed on a small number of offenders detained under a hospital order. But the government should consider introducing more prompt and regular reviews by the Mental Health Tribunal to ensure that any loss of liberty is justified. Witnesses told us that in the absence of effective support in the community, autistic people and people with learning disabilities could still end up in unjustified detention on other legal bases. The government has stated that the change in the bill will come into force only where there are strong community services in place. But it's vital this does not lead to delays in the much-needed reform. We therefore welcome the government's commitment to provide a written ministerial statement to both Houses of Parliament on an annual basis, updating on progress on implementation. In terms of what more the bill could do to improve the prospects of patients receiving timely care in the community, we also ask the government to consider introducing an English equivalent to the right to a mental health assessment that applies in Wales. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me just say that this report makes clear that there is much more needed to fix the broken mental health system in this country, and I know the government recognises this as well. This is a small, targeted bill which will not change everything, but the changes it does introduce are significant and long overdue. The government's also committed to introducing mental health experts in every school, setting up young future hubs, and recruiting 8,500 more mental health staff. By focusing on community-based interventions and driving down waiting lists for mental health support alongside the welcome changes in this bill, we can turn the tide and fix a broken mental health system so that the human rights of all those with mental health needs can be properly protected and they can get the support they need. I commend this report to the House.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I commend the Honourable Member and his committee for the report, and we on this side will be looking very favourably at it, especially as we go into committee stage. I do have one technical question, if I may. He talked about the restraint for people who have autism and learning disabilities, and currently the reviewed timetable to work out if they have a mental health disorder or it's related to their condition is 28 days. I wonder if his committee had a look at that position from the rights of the human rights aspect to see whether or not that is the right time to make that assessment.
We did certainly look at the process for assessing people as to whether it was appropriate. And this issue very much came up. It was one where absolutely the individual's human rights are exercised, and the careful balance between the need to protect them and those around them and ensure that the deprivation of liberty is only ever a last resort must be carefully struck. From the top of my head, I seem to remember that the report finds that the balance as currently lands is appropriate, albeit it's one that the government should look at going forward. And certainly if I've got that wrong, I'll happily correct the record at a future date.
Chris Bloore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for his report. I was really interested in the point that he made about the equivalence between England and Wales about a right to a mental health assessment. And with mental health admissions to acute settings increasing year by year, would he agree with me that if we were to introduce such a equivalence for England, it could help drastically improve admissions if we weren't waiting to those crisis points for young people, particularly to get the support that they need?
Peter Swallow.
I think my honourable friend makes a really good point. It is so vital, as we've seen across health, across education, across the justice system, that we get back to a place where we are focused laser-like on early interventions, because we know that the earlier we intervene, the better it is for all involved. And I think absolutely, as he suggests, improving our mental health system, potentially through this measure as recommended in the report, would have the effect of meaning that we do not get to crisis point. We don't get to the point where individuals have to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act, but instead the community support, which we know works when it's there, can be used instead to provide the support needed for these individuals.
Richard Foord.
Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Joint Committee for the report in relation to the Mental Health Bill. I note the Committee's call for more prompt and regular reviews by the Mental Health Tribunal. The basis for this call in the report was compliance with the liberty for the individual. But would he agree that regular reviews by the Tribunal are also in the interests of families and neighbours of mental health patients, given how disruptive and upsetting it can be for families and neighbours to have patients living in the community?
Absolutely, and we heard through our reporting of families, particularly families where their child is in treatment, being in real distress, particularly when that treatment is happening quite a long way away from where that family lives, making access to that family member even more difficult. So the point he makes is really important. Of course, the Human Rights Committee was scrutinising this bill through the lens of human rights, though it was important to us, as I said in the statement, that we get the experience of those with lived experience of the mental health system to inform our recommendations, and absolutely the point he makes is a very powerful one.
We now come to the backbench debate on access to NHS dentistry. Melanie on to move.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to start by thanking the Backbench Business Committee for granting time for this debate, and to colleagues who supported that application. I'm pleased that there's lots of people who want to speak. I am aware of the time limit, so I'm going to keep my remarks short. During the general election, Labour promised to tackle the lack of NHS dental services, and I welcome the progress that's already been made in its first 10 months. After 14 years of neglect, we're finally starting to see action to address the crisis in NHS dental care, including the launch of 700,000 extra urgent dental appointments, with my own integrated care board in Humber and North Yorkshire delivering 27,196 of those across the region. This government is rightly focusing on prevention, by rolling out much-needed supervised toothbrushing schemes in schools. It's a small intervention with long-term benefits, particularly for the children growing up in areas like mine, where levels of tooth decay are among the highest in England. Currently, 1 in 3 5-year-olds in deprived areas experience tooth decay. This is a shocking statistic that simply must be addressed. Over 260,000 people have signed a petition led by the British Dental Association, the Women's Institute and the Daily Mirror, calling on the government to urgently deliver on their promise to reform NHS dentistry. And the demand couldn't be more urgent. Catherine, one of many constituents that has written to me with issues about dental provision locally, had been with her dentist for over a decade. But during the pandemic, a simple missed appointment that was cancelled by the surgery itself, saw her removed from her regular appointments, and she's since been unable to join another practice, being told that waiting lists would take at least 2 years. And in the meantime, she's suffered devastating deterioration to her oral health, losing all of her back teeth, suffering with an infected crown and bridge, and facing the real fear of losing her top teeth too. And Catherine, she's only in her 40s. She was quoted £14,000 privately for treatment. She simply cannot afford that. She's had to endure constant pain that really no one should be left to bear. Constituents regularly tell me that they can't find an NHS dentist taking new patients. They're calling every single practice listed on the NHS website and they're getting nowhere. People are living in pain, they're missing work, and their mental health is suffering. There's even examples of people attempting their own dental work, and we cannot allow this to become the norm. The desire for action is also supported by dental practices in my constituency. One of them told me, we're seeing high-need patients we've never treated before, often for complex work, but we're doing this using the same budget that we've had for years. In fact, some of the new urgent care and schools-based initiatives are not additionally funded. The BDA's most recent figures show us that in England, dentists are delivering the least NHS care of all 4 UK nations. Only 39% of dentists in England are spending most of their time on NHS work, compared with nearly 60% in Scotland. Practices are delivering NHS treatments at a loss. They lose over £42 for every denture fitted and nearly £8 for every new patient that they see. This Labour government pledged to reform the dental contract. It was in our manifesto. It was part of the plan that we were elected on. I welcome the early signs of recovery, but when we say that we want to go further, faster, it is precisely on issues like this that the public are looking to government to deliver. In Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes and across the nation, we are privileged to have so many dedicated dental professionals. Tomorrow I'm visiting Dental Design Studio to celebrate their 20 years of high-quality dental care provision in Cleethorpes. It's a real credit to the team there who've delivered consistent care to local people, often under increasing strain. And our young people are not forgotten locally, thanks to the commitment of Dr. Jatinder Ubi from Dentology. Multiple young people in my constituency have received essential dental support. We must not let dentistry become a luxury service, only for those who can afford to go private. We need a new approach that's fair, that funds dentists properly, and that delivers accessible care to everyone who needs it.
The question is, as on the order paper, and I call Sir Julian Lewis, and because we have so many people wishing to contribute and we have to conclude by 5 p.m, we will have a time limit of 3 minutes starting from now. Sir Julian, but I think you can manage it. I think you can do it.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for that no-pressure introduction, and I congratulate the Honourable Lady for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes on her speech, with every part of which I agree. I was hoping to quote from the individual cases of the constituents, from the local Women's Institute. All that will have to go by the board. I do have a wonderful briefing from the British Dental Association, and I would just like, in the remaining 2.5 minutes, to make one pertinent observation from which I think everything else flows. Dentistry is a highly skilled profession in which practitioners can charge colossal sums of money in private practice, and thus this gives them a financial incentive to steer clear of working for the NHS. And this really is the root of the problem. And I was pleasantly surprised when I put to the Secretary of State for Health a point made by the Darcy report last September, and I put this to him on the 13th of March, and I quoted the report as saying there are enough dentists in England, just not enough dentists willing to do enough NHS work, which impacts provision for the poorest in society. And his reply was, NHS dentistry is in a terrible state, and in fact in many parts of the country it barely exists. There are lots of reasons for that, and it's a source of constant astonishment to me that the dentistry budget was underspent year after year despite that situation. But the reality is, of course, that the reason why it is underspent is not, and the BDA points this out, it's not because of the lack of demand, but because NHS practices can't fill vacancies and are unable to meet contractual commitments. And therefore, those who do work with and for the NHS are having to deliver dental care at a loss. So there is a fundamental requirement for a rewritten constitution and contract by which it becomes both worthwhile for people to practice dentistry in the NHS, because otherwise we are going to see a two-tier society in which only the rich can get the dental care that they so desperately need.
Irene Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When the NHS was introduced, it made the biggest positive changes ever to the health of the general population. And the original How to Use Your NHS booklet from 1948 stated it will provide you with all medical, dental and nursing care. Everyone, rich or poor, man, woman or child, can use it or any part of it. And on the topic of dentistry, it said after 5th of July 1948, you can go to any dentist taking part in the new arrangements. You would find a list at your post office, and at that time 83% of registered dentists signed up to work in the NHS. Currently in England, approximately 66% are signed up to work in the NHS, a significant reduction since the early days. And also this reduction demonstrates a clear barrier to access. As a former NHS manager in Scotland, I have seen the importance of early intervention when it comes to health inequalities, and particularly in dentistry. Scotland too has an access crisis with decreasing levels in NHS participating dentists, and naturally these lower levels of participation affect patient access to NHS dental services, and dentists lose the chance to pick up early signs of decay and cancers and other serious issues, which result not only in higher costs to the NHS, but of course really worse outcomes for patients. Additionally, children and adults from the most deprived areas were less likely than their wealthier counterparts to have seen their dentist within the last 2 years, and recent statistics from Public Health Scotland showed that 55.9% of children from the most deprived areas have seen their dentist in the last 2 years, compared to 75.8% for children in the least deprived areas, and this drops to 42% and 53.5% for adults. In September 2008, the gap in child participation between the most and least deprived areas was 3 percentage points. This increased to 7 percentage points by 2010 and 18 percentage points in 2021, and then 20 percentage points in 2023, and we cannot let this continue. As oral health inequalities continue to grow, it is important that our NHS strategy involves a focus on increasing participation and access in more deprived areas. Otherwise, we will continue to see worrying trends like this, which cause more serious problems further down the line.
Ben Maguire. Well, we then come to Andrew Murrison, Dr. Andrew Murrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I prefer Ben. I've never enjoyed Andrew, but Andrew will do. Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, NHS dentists, quite honestly, are saints. Because as my right honourable friend has said, the reason we don't have any NHS dentists is because it's far more remunerative to do expensive dental work rather than the sort of grinding service work that NHS dentistry implies. And the reason for that, fundamentally, is because of the so-called new dental contract introduced in 2006. That's the problem. Units of dental activity have plagued the dental profession provision of NHS dentistry all these years. I'm delighted the government is revising the dental contract that its predecessor introduced 20 years ago. But unless it's prepared to underwrite it, I'm afraid we'll still be more or less in the same position. It isn't as if we're not training dentists. We're training more and more dentists, and there are more and more dental schools, and rightly so. But if those professionals are going to practice in the NHS, they need to be incentivised to do so. I will give way.
I agree with the Honourable Gentleman about the 2006 NHS dentistry contract, which clearly needed revision. Why did his party not do that in 14 years in government?
I'm sorry, he's destroyed the sort of consensual way in which I was trying to introduce my remarks. If I may go on to explain that I think there's been a conspiracy of silence all these years over NHS dentistry. Yep. And what government has to get to grips with is whether it intends that dentistry should continue to be a universal part of our NHS or not, and whether it's going to be exempted from the universality that has characterised the provision of healthcare services in this country since 1948. Now, the government could decide that dentistry is a bit like ophthalmic optics, which, of course, in the 1940s was deliberately excluded from NHS provision. I'm not recommending it, but what I am recommending to the Minister is that we are at least honest with the public, because at the moment we have this pretence around NHS dentistry that says, of course you have the right to have your teeth fixed at no cost to you at all or up front. But in reality, in most parts of the country, mine included, that is a complete fiction. Yeah. So when the government comes to its new arrangements, and I welcome that very much, can we have firstly some honesty? Can we have some money behind it? And can we have some idea about what part of current NHS provision the government intends to deprioritise, if indeed it's its intention, to make sure that we truly have universal provision of NHS dentistry going forward.
Yeah. Claire Hazelgrove.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, for securing this debate today. Today also marks a year since the general election was called. Over the 2.5 years before that, I was out knocking on doors and listening to people across the Filton and Bradley Stoke constituency, as I still am almost every weekend. One of the issues often raised with me most was how hard it had become to find and keep an NHS dentist. Listening and acting on what matters locally, I took this campaign up. I raised these issues then with the then Shadow Health Secretary, who kindly raised them here in the House of Commons for us locally before the election. Still, there was no change from the party opposite, who voted against Labour's plans to rescue NHS dentistry and, remarkably, continued to do nothing. Conservative failure is far from a deterrent, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also ran a survey asking local people what their experiences had been. And I'd like to thank fellow residents who took the time to complete this. The findings were clear. Only 31% of those who completed my survey had an NHS dentist. But almost everyone without an NHS dentist, 97%, wanted one. Notably, 65% of those without one said that this was because theirs went private. And nearly all responders, 94%, agreed that Labour's plans to open up 700,000 more urgent appointments a year where needed most would help. Still, no action came from the Conservatives, and local people voted for change. My very first question in this House was around ensuring that we have the right infrastructure, including dentists, as our communities grow. Living locally, I know how challenging this has become. I don't have an NHS dentist either. Madam Deputy Speaker, while receiving official designation as a dental desert isn't something anyone wants for their community, I was also relieved that we finally have a government that recognises the challenges we face. This Labour government's action means that across our ICB area,
we will now have an extra 19,000 urgent NHS dental appointments. And I know this will be just the beginning. Reforming the dental contract, looking at how we can encourage more dentists to stay within the NHS, getting back to that place where, whether you like going or not, you can again pop that dentist calendar appointment back on the calendar. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will not stand for a future where as many as 6 in 10 children have rotting teeth by the age of 5, as they do in the Britain we've inherited. I will not stand for a future where the most common reason why children are admitted to hospital is tooth decay, as it is in the Britain we've inherited. I will continue to campaign for good access to NHS dentists across my community for as long as it takes. And I'm glad to finally have a government that I can work with rather than have to fight against to get the NHS dental services we need locally.
Milne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Since I was elected to my constituency of Horsham, I've been approached by many residents facing impossible prices for urgent dental treatment. Annie is 67 and caring for her husband with terminal bowel cancer. You would think she has enough things to worry about, but with the state of dental services in the Horsham area, she has been unable to find an NHS dentist for 20 miles radius. Forced to go private, she paid £80 for an assessment and was then quoted £150 for an extraction. She asked simply, when will an alternative to private dentistry be available? And I also heard from Sally. Her family were denied NHS root canal treatment with an £800 private option as the only alternative. She says, how can we trust their advice when it feels like it's all about the money? But of course this is a crisis not of dentists, but of dentistry. The NHS contract, based as it is on units of dental activity, is simply no longer fit for purpose if it ever was. The conflict of interest between public and private is the result of more and more dentists being forced to subsidise their NHS contracts with private work. The government has committed to providing more support and more urgent appointments, but it's hard to get enough new employees through the front door when so many continue to leave by the back. In the area covered by my local integrated care board, there are more people leaving than joining across many key dental roles. These are the figures for a 6-month period to the end of March last year. General dentists, 41 in, 43 out. Orthodontists, 1 in, 2 out. Dental nurses, 48 in, 60 out. Receptionists, 48 in, 54 out. In fact, 5 out of 9 roles in dentist clinics have been losing staff faster than they can get new ones. The result, of course, is ever-declining access to NHS dental services, with children losing their teeth before they even reach the age of 10, and the horror stories of DIY dental treatment. I would like to leave you with words of the West Sussex Local Dental Committee, who contacted me just weeks after my election last year regarding the NHS dental contract. Their warning was simple, and I quote, "If we don't act quickly, there may be very little NHS left to adopt a new NHS contract." Madam Deputy Speaker, I accept that the present government were not responsible for causing this problem, but they are responsible for having to fix it. Thank you.
Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. A crisis has unfolded quietly but painfully in Norfolk, and it's one that we cannot afford to ignore any longer. That crisis is the urgent and worsening state of NHS dentistry. Just 33.6% of adults in Norfolk have seen an NHS dentist in the last 2 years, well below the national average of 40%. For children, the picture is even worse, only 42.7% seen compared to 55% nationally. A&E visits due to dental problems are rising. In the east of England, we've seen 152.6 visits per 100,000 people. Worse than London, the south east, the Midlands. The only region doing worse than us is the south west. We now have just 328 dentists with any NHS activity in Norfolk and Waveney, down from 423 in 2019. That's one dentist for every 3,177 people. One of my constituents recently rang 111 with a swollen face from an infected tooth. They contacted 6 emergency dentists and couldn't get seen by a single one. They were forced to go private, paying over £1,000. That simply isn't good enough in a modern society. Yeah, of course.
I thank my friend for giving way. He's setting out an eloquent case for why we need improvement in dentistry. Does he agree with me that the access crisis we're seeing today is the result of a decade of underfunding and contract failure. In Basingstoke, similar to his constituency, 2/3 of adults and nearly half of children didn't see a dentist last year. Does he believe it goes beyond the postcode lottery and is in fact a systemic failure?
Point by my honourable friend, and it's as if he's read the next part of my speech as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State himself has described our area as the Sahara of dental deserts. I agree, but we need more than just a diagnosis. We need solutions. I urge the government to invest in a new dental school in the Edith Cavell Medical Campus in South Norfolk. We need to train dentists where they are needed and keep them there. I also encourage all dentists to complete the government's new survey before the 16th of June, but insight must lead to reform, starting with a broken NHS dental contract. Norfolk has been taken for granted for too long. Our county is ready for change, and I know my honourable friends will work together to deliver it, because only by working together can we unlock the dental revolution that we need across Norfolk.
Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is an honour to speak in the debate today to raise the plight of my constituents in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, some of those who are struggling in silence, pain and frustration, simply trying to access basic NHS dental care. But I'd also like to thank the Honourable Member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes for bringing this debate, and to say that I share her views on pretty much everything that she has said, but particularly on the wider impact of poor dentistry on A&E, the NHS more widely, and particularly on cardiac health. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have many constituents' testimony to refer to today. So let me begin with the real story of a real person who has worked tirelessly her entire life, and now, due to long COVID, is housebound and dependent. When she missed one single NHS dental appointment due to illness, she was removed from the list. Since then, she's not been able to find another NHS dentist. When an infection struck, she waited a week for emergency care at St Richard's Hospital, and she is not alone. In 2023, only 24.7% of adults in the South East were seen by an NHS dentist in the previous 2 years, the second lowest rate in England. In some areas, fewer than 1 in 5 adults have been able to access NHS dentistry. Yes, the government have announced recent steps. 26,546 additional urgent care dental appointments for Sussex, a rise of 245 to 455 per week. A £20,000 Golden Hello relocation incentive to attract dentists to underserved areas. And 17 of these posts have been approved for Sussex. And whilst I welcome these steps, they are not enough. The DDU and the Public Accounts Committee have made it clear, as other colleagues have said, the NHS contract is broken, disincentivising dentists from treating those patients with the greatest needs. In 2022, 91% of dentists surveyed felt worn out, 84% reported burnout. They're walking away from NHS dentistry, not out of disinterest, but because the system is unsustainable. So I ask the Minister, how many of the urgent contracts are now available, and when will real contract reform take place?
My very good friend who's no longer in... Oh, she is in her place. I am so sorry. The Honourable Member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. So for far too long, people across the country have struggled to access NHS dental care. And in my own constituency, I've heard heartbreaking stories. One constituent has struggled to find an NHS dentist, which has left him without access to the dentures he needs. But he told me, all I want is to return to work, as I have always worked, but have no upper teeth is holding me back, as I am so embarrassed. Poor dental health should not be a barrier to individuals returning to work, and my constituent's situation is unacceptable. That simply shouldn't happen. But there are glimmers of hope. This government's announcement of 700,000 extra urgent dental appointments is a vital step forward, and in Greater Manchester alone, nearly 18,000 of those appointments will be delivered, including for residents in Lee and Atherton who've been waiting far too long. It's a sign of intent and a recognition that action is overdue. But for all this to work, we need the workforce in place, and that's where the challenge remains. At Railway Road Dental Practice in Lee, they've been trying to replace a senior dentist for nearly 9 years. Despite advertising, there's been no interest. It's a clear sign that practices, particularly in areas of high deprivation, need better support to attract and retrain staff. And however, this government's Golden Hello scheme is a smart move, offering financial incentives to bring dentists into the areas that need them most. And through the NHS long-term workforce plan, we're increasing dental training places by 40%. And like the Honourable Gentleman for New Forest East, we must also acknowledge the people who've kept NHS dentistry going through difficult times. And I want to pay tribute to Mr Dobransky. He is a local dentist who's given 53 years of his life to the NHS. And his service to the people of Lee is nothing short of remarkable, and I thank him sincerely for it. So yes, the challenge is big, but I am encouraged by the steps being taken. The extra appointments, the investment in workforce, the renewed focus on prevention, these are all signs that we're finally facing up to the crisis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for securing this debate. I was delighted to be able to support the application because it's an issue that deeply affects my constituents. Dentistry is in a crisis nationally, and nowhere is it felt more so than rural communities like West Dorset. In my constituency, we have just 15 dental practices offering any form of NHS dental care, serving a population of more than 94,000 people. The consequences...
Will the Honourable Member give way?
I will give way.
I have to confess that I rather envy the Honourable Member that he has 15 when I have a mere 9. In fact, as it became evident at the Public Accounts Committee inquiry, which I attended as a member of that committee, Minehead in my constituency has fewer dentists than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. And in my view, it's really important that we carry on lobbying the ICBs, because they're the ones that can give out the contracts. Thank you.
I thank her for her intervention, and I know that she suffers from a lot of the same issues that West Dorset does, given the similarity of our constituencies. The consequences are stark. Only 36% of adults in West Dorset have seen a dentist in the last 2 years. Just 50% of children have had a dental appointment in that time, and that is an alarming 9% lower than in 2019. I know that the government has announced a rescue plan to provide 700,000 more urgent dental appointments and to recruit new dentists to areas that need them most, and that is welcome news. But I must ask the Minister, how exactly are areas that need them most being assessed? And what specific provisions are being made to ensure that rural areas like West Dorset, where the population density is low but unmet demand is high, are not once again left behind?
On that point,
I will give way.
Thank you for giving way. In Devon, we have a budget of £377,000 to recruit new dentists. Sadly, only 2 of the 22 dentists have actually been recruited. Would my colleague agree with me that this demonstrates that the Golden Hello schemes from the Conservatives has completely failed, and we desperately need a new contract now?
Yes. Here.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right, a lot of this does come down to the funding model. Because when funding is allocated by the current funding models, it is always rural communities that lose out. I ask that the rurality of places like West Dorset be recognised both in the workforce planning and resource allocation. Because the South West, we have the highest rate of dental-related A&E visits, 217 per 100,000 people. That's 1 in every 460 people turning to emergency care because they can't get an NHS dentist appointment. Preventable oral health issues are flooding our hospitals because we have failed to resource our community dental services. The government has made some minor tweaks to the dysfunctional NHS contract that it's welcomed, but morale is at an all-time low. Over 60% of dentists in England are thinking of leaving the NHS altogether. And the current contract often leaves dentists losing money on every NHS patient they see. For example, a typical dentist loses £42.60 per denture fitted. That's unsustainable, and it's time to reform the system as a whole because change cannot wait. I ask the government to come forward with a clear timeline for negotiating on contract reform and to properly support integrated care boards, as my colleague has said, with ring-fence funding for dental services. The Liberal Democrats are calling for a comprehensive dental rescue package that would guarantee access to an NHS dentist for everyone in need of urgent or emergency care. It would also ensure that NHS dental checkups for those already eligible, including children, pregnant women, new mothers and people on low incomes. In addition, the package would guarantee that anyone beginning chemotherapy, undergoing a transplant or facing critical treatments receives the essential dental assessments that they need beforehand. I'd also like the government to reverse the cuts to public health grants, which have fallen 26% in real terms since 2015, restore funding for preventative oral health programmes, expand supervised toothbrushing for children in schools and nurseries, and scrap the VAT on children's toothbrushes and toothpaste. Madam Deputy Speaker, I ask the government to act, and to act now. On behalf of my constituents and all rural communities, I would ask that communities like West Dorset are not treated as an afterthought in the funding model, but are given priority.
Lindsay Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and let me begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes for securing this vital debate. This issue touches on every community, but I'd like to focus on how this crisis is playing out in my own constituency of Amber Valley. Amber Valley has less than a quarter of the national average number of NHS dentists per 100,000 people. When I speak to residents on the doorstep and in my surgeries, I hear the same heartbreaking stories from people in pain, unable to access an NHS appointment. Some have become so desperate that they've resorted to pulling out their own teeth. During my campaign, I made a promise to the people of Amber Valley to fight for better access to NHS dental care. That remains my most urgent pledge. We do have a handful of dedicated, hard-working dentists who are maintaining an NHS patient lists against difficult odds. Dentists like Dr. Nadia Duarte at Amber Valley Dental Practice, but most surgeries simply do not have the resources to keep their NHS lists open. This puts huge pressure on the few that do, with waiting lists now stretching over 2 years. Simply put, you are extremely lucky to get an NHS appointment in Amber Valley. Amber Valley dentists told me that our surgeries received the lowest payment per NHS treatment when compared to neighbouring constituencies. This made it almost impossible to recruit and retain the quality NHS staff we need. I took this up with the Derbyshire Integrated Care Board. I told them that this was not just unfair, but it had created a crisis of health inequality for Amber Valley. I'm grateful that they listened and acted, securing an additional £240,000 to address this underpayment and allow our surgeries in Amber Valley to take on more NHS staff and make it easier for us to get the NHS appointments we need. This is a real win for Amber Valley, but nothing less than my constituents deserve. And it's only a small part of the solution, and one that will take time to bear fruit. That's why I particularly welcome the government's commitment to 700,000 additional emergency NHS dental appointments each year, and I'd urge my constituents to access one of the 16,298 such appointments in Derbyshire. I promised the people of Amber Valley that I would speak up for them and fight for the dental care that should be their right. So while I'm grateful for the progress of the government so far, I say to my honourable friend, please, let's go further and faster so that no one in Amber Valley has to suffer without the dental care they need.
Claire Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes for introducing this debate. Thornbury-in-Yate is a dental desert. According to a recent newspaper report, not a single dentist in Thornbury-in-Yate is taking on new NHS patients for the third year in a row, leaving people having to travel long distances for care or forced to pay for private treatment. And I'm sure as a fellow South West MP, the Minister will be as concerned as I am to hear that in September 2024, NHS dental activity delivery rate was lowest in the South West at 61.6%, compared to the highest in London at 94.7%. Not surprisingly, in the South West, around 1 in every 460 people had to be taken to A&E with a dental problem in 23-24, which is substantially higher than in London, where it was only 1 in every 860 people. The area covered by the NHS Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire Integrated Care Board is the worst of all worlds, with fewer dentists adjusted for population size and lower dental activity delivery rates, alongside higher numbers of A&E visits with dental problems. And I want to highlight 2 cases that show the impact this is having on vulnerable people. One constituent wrote, "Despite contacting more than a dozen dental practices in and around South Gloucestershire and Bristol, I've been told by every single surgery that no NHS appointments are available. However, I've been offered private appointments if I am willing to pay. The situation is even more distressing as my wife is currently pregnant and requires urgent dental care, which is crucial for her health and that of our unborn child. Pregnant women are entitled to free NHS dental care, yet this right is rendered meaningless when no NHS appointments are available." Another constituent who wrote to me is a cancer patient who needed major dental treatment ahead of intense radiotherapy. Bristol Dental Hospital advised them they would need lifelong follow-up care, but during COVID that treatment was stopped and they were discharged back to their NHS dentist. Soon after, surprise, surprise, the practice ceased to provide NHS dentistry and they could not find another, so were forced to pay for their essential treatment. I will indeed.
I thank my honourable friend. There seems to be a consensus across the House that the NHS dental contract is broken, and that is a consensus across the country as well, including my constituency of Witney. If there's one thing we get out of this debate today, if we got a timeline as to when the government would actually commit to fixing that and putting legislation before the House, that would be a benefit. Do you agree? Excuse me.
I thank my honourable friend, and I do agree. I do think we also need to have solutions for people like my constituent in the meantime, because they've already had to pay £1,400 for treatment, and they have another £2,000 worth of work they face in order to be able to eat normally. That's a stiff fee when you're reliant on PIP and your spouse's pension. They feel they have nowhere to turn. So I just want to sum up by saying that patients like my constituents deserve to have access to an NHS dentist. We need an emergency scheme to guarantee access to the free NHS dental checkups for those already eligible, children, new mothers, those like my constituent's wife who are pregnant, and those on low incomes. And we need a dental rescue package that brings dentists back into the NHS from the private sector by fixing the dental contract and using flexible commissioning to meet patient needs in the meantime.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Anyone who has severe toothache knows the unbearable agony. In those moments, it feels like there's nothing worse. But imagine watching your 4-year-old child suffer that same pain, and imagine that you're told this can't be helped. This was the reality of my constituent Louise. A single mum, Louise got in touch with me at breaking point. She had to watch her son suffer through constant distress, crying in agony, unable to sleep, refusing his food. When she managed to see an emergency dentist, she was told he would need between 4 and 8 teeth extracted under local anaesthesia. But the wait time for that procedure was up to 2 years. Louise was left with no choice but to manage her son's pain with daily Calpol and ibuprofen. That's not healthcare, it's abandonment. Sadly, Louise's story is not rare. In my constituency of Blackpool South, people are being driven to desperate measures. They're turning up to A&E in agony because they can't get dentist appointments. Some are even resorting to pulling out their own teeth at home. DIY dentistry in 21st century Britain. NHS dentistry was left to decay under the previous government, and I stood in that spot over on the other benches 1 year ago today, highlighting this issue of the problems we have in Blackpool. In Blackpool South, just 34% of adults have seen an NHS dentist in the last 2 years. That's a sharp fall from over 50% a few years ago, well above the national average. Among children, only 45% were seen in the past year, lower than almost anywhere in England. People living in poverty are most at risk of poor dental health, and in my constituency, poverty is a daily reality for so many. Children's tooth decay is one of the clearest signs of how deep this crisis runs. In Blackpool, 1 in 5 3-year-olds and nearly 1 in 3 5-year-olds have visible dental decay, among the highest rates in the country. Behind every number is a child missing class because of dental pain and a parent like Louise who feels helpless. All of this in a town that already faces some of the deepest health inequalities in the country. I'm pleased that the government has rolled out 700,000 more urgent dentist appointments, and I know the government is committed to recruiting new dentists in areas like Blackpool that need them most. And I welcome the government's commitment to reforming the dental contract, but I urge them to act now. The BDA points out that the reform service won't work if there's no workforce left by the time it's finally introduced. The sector needs a clear timetable for negotiations, a firm deadline for a new system, and a sustainable funding model. They need to build a system not on crisis care, but on prevention and early access. And it's never been more urgent. People in Blackpool South are not asking for special treatment, they're just asking for treatment and the simple assurance that toothache won't become trauma.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm also very grateful to the Honourable Lady for Grimsby, Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes for securing this debate when I was very pleased to be able to support myself. I'd like to tell the House about Philip, who wrote to me in his own words, in desperation. He's a proud Armed Forces veteran and was recovering from a recent surgery for lung cancer when he suffered a fall which led him to losing a number of his teeth. After his maxillofacial surgery, he was horrified to discover that there were no dentists taking NHS patients near him. His previous dentist had simply removed him from their system. He needed dentures, not just cosmetically, but to be able to eat proper meals, and was facing a future without any of this support. A case like this will ring true, I'm sure, for far too many people here and indeed in my constituency of North Norfolk. I'm pleased to say that in this instance, my team and I got straight on the case and were able to help Philip secure an NHS appointment at a local dentist earlier this week, and we look forward to seeing him with a full smile again soon. But we can't do that for the 2/3 of my constituents who aren't seeing an NHS dentist, and nor should we have to. We need to fix this broken system that is letting people down in North Norfolk. One exciting prospect on the horizon is the establishment of a dental school at the University of East Anglia. My honourable colleague and nearby neighbour has mentioned this already. It has support from members of all parties in Norfolk. We're excited for Norfolk to start training and placing its own dentists in the coming years. The University of East Anglia needed places or funding for places from the government confirmed before May the 2nd in order to appear in the UCAS applications for students to begin in September 2026. However, the Treasury have demanded that any such spending is not confirmed until the spending review in a few weeks' time. So, for the sake of less than 6 weeks of bureaucracy, my constituents face yet another full year of delay. Nevertheless, I'm very pleased that it was confirmed this week that Cromer will have an expanded dental practice taking on new NHS patients. The Lib Dem-led North Norfolk District Council have worked to secure a new lease for the former Tourist Information Centre with the Dental Design Studio. And this new practice will have 5 surgeries, all at ground level, to improve accessibility. After years of decline, we may finally be seeing green shoots of improvement in North Norfolk, part of the dental desert. I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to stand up for everyone who's struggled with our crumbling system over the past few years. Standing up for people like Philip, for the many children facing tooth decay, and for all those sat on waiting lists, for those forced to fork out for private treatment. Things must improve, and they can improve, and I'll be fighting hard to ensure that they do.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. NHS dentistry has been a recurring theme for me both before the election and since, and I know this is true for most colleagues. And this is why, in fact, the Labour government has made it a priority. But we're starting from a very difficult place, and let me lay out for you, Madam Deputy Speaker, just how bad it is in Morecambe and Loonsdale. Last year, I knocked on the door of a man in Morecambe who'd lost most of his teeth because he didn't have access to dental care. Just yesterday, a constituent wrote to me asking me to speak in this debate. She and her husband travel over 80 miles 4 times a year just to see their NHS dentist. They're retired, they can't afford to go private, and like many older people, they do need regular and more complex care. We don't have to look far to see the root of the problem, so to speak. Dentists have been telling us for years that the NHS dental contract is not fit for purpose. The contract creates perverse incentives. Dentists are discouraged from treating the patients who need them the most. Now, I appreciate that this is partly because in the late 90s and early noughties, the contract actually incentivised over-treating of patients. But now the pendulum has swung back too far the other way, and we have to find a balanced approach. Dental decay is one of the leading causes of hospital admissions in children. In 2023, over 30,000 children ended up in hospital needing to...
Can my right honourable friend give way on that
I'll
point?
happily give way.
The government has an historic commitment to prevention. My constituency of Birmingham Erdington is one of the youngest constituencies in the country. Does my honourable friend agree with me that we must continue to build on supervised brushing and targeted fluoride applications in early years settings to protect the youngsters? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and she is absolutely right. Prevention is always better than cure. When I sat on Lancashire County Council Health Scrutiny Committee, we took evidence that showed that things like supervised brushing, help with fluoride, were some of the most cost-effective interventions that could be had and prevented the horror of 30,000 children going into hospital for preventable tooth removal. And dental health has become a stark marker of inequality. Without ongoing care and access to that preventative care, children in less well-off families are more likely to suffer worsening dental problems. So the contract was a major problem. It locked in those perverse incentives, but the situation was then worsened by over a decade of neglect of all areas of public health under the last government. For too many families, they don't go to the dentist until, frankly, it's too late, and it's very expensive. So we need those preventative measures that my honourable friend was talking about before, and we need access to NHS dentists. We know that not being able to go to the dentist means people turn up to A&E, but they get sent away with painkillers and antibiotics. It doesn't fulfil their needs. So I'm pleased that our government is taking this seriously. I'm pleased we recognise the scale of the problem, and I'm pleased we are taking action not only on NHS dentistry, but also on that preventative care, because we owe it to families in Morecambe and Loonsdale, Madam Deputy Speaker, and across the country to fix this broken system. So a dental contract that actually works, fair funding for local services, and access to care that is available when people need it.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. NHS dentistry is in crisis, and South Devon is no exception. According to the Nuffield Trust, it's now at its most perilous point in its 75-year history. Parents are pulling out their children's teeth at home, pensioners travelling abroad for basic dental treatment, hundreds of people in the dental desert of South Devon who've simply given up hope of ever seeing an NHS dentist again. Last year, 13 million adults across the country couldn't get an NHS dental appointment, more than 1 in 4. In my constituency, the situation is even worse. Over 60% of adults and 50% of children in Devon have not seen a dentist in the past 2 years. No local practices are accepting new NHS patients, and waiting times can stretch into years. The crisis is driven by an underfunded and outdated system, pushing professionals out. In England, NHS dentistry receives just £38 a head. In Scotland, I'm told it's nearly double that. Each year, hundreds of millions of pounds in dental funding goes unspent, not because it's not needed, but because dental practices can't recruit or retrain staff under the current contract. The rigid contract system is also preventing dentists coming up with innovative ideas, like a proposal for a no-frills, low-cost dental service in Dartmouth in my constituency, which got nowhere because of NHS red tape. I ask the Minister, when will we hear about a reformed dental contract? The Dental Defence Union has highlighted other issues which are contributing to the collapse. One major concern is falling morale among dental professionals. In a 2022 survey of nearly 500 dental staff, 86% reported experiencing increased workplace pressures over the past 2 to 3 years, a clear signal that the working conditions themselves are driving people out of the profession. Dentists are also losing money to provide NHS care. For every denture they fit, they're out of pocket by over £40. No wonder over 60% of NHS dentists say they plan to leave. We need urgent action.
That's why the Liberal Democrats are calling for real reform. We're campaigning to end dental deserts and guarantee access to an NHS dentist for everyone who needs urgent or emergency care. Our dental rescue package would bring dentists back to the NHS by fixing the broken contract and using flexible commissioning to meet local needs. We also want an emergency scheme to ensure free NHS checkups for those already eligible, like children, new mothers, pregnant women and people on low incomes, and guaranteed access to dental care for anyone needing treatment before chemotherapy. The longer this goes on, the worse it gets. South Devon needs proper dental care, not more delays. Yes, preventative dental care costs money, but prevention is always better and cheaper than cure.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank my honourable friend, the member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, for securing this important debate. And can I start by thanking the dentists, hygienists, dental nurses and practice staff in my constituency of Gloucester who do so much to look after my constituents. But the reality is the system, the dentist system we inherited from the previous government is broken. And we need to fix it. And it comes up on the doorstep time and time again when I'm knocking on doors in Gloucester that patients can't get the dentist appointments they need, that we have people pulling their own teeth out at home, that we have children with teeth rotting in their mouths. We need more NHS dentists in Gloucester, and this week I have launched a campaign to get a new dental practice in Gloucester City to deliver for my constituents. I wrote to my local ICB earlier this week, and I think we should be seeing that as soon as we possibly can. So I would welcome a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss that campaign and how I can deliver that dental practice for my constituents. I do recognise, however, that the ICB and this government has made fantastic progress on urgent dental care in Gloucestershire. We've got another 11,000 urgent dental appointments in my constituency in the wider area, and that is already delivering for my constituents who are most in need. But what we really need is those regular check-ups and appointments so that we can get people seen more regularly. I welcome reform to the dental contract and the consultation with local dentists, and I do encourage all of the dentists and dental practices in my constituency to get involved with that so we can deliver a better dentistry contract and a better dental system than the one that was left behind a year ago by the Conservative Party. Thank you.
Dr. Susan Murray. Oh, sorry, not Dr. Susan Murray. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And thanks to the member for Greater Grimsby and Cleethorpes for bringing this important debate. In Mid-Dumbartonshire, my constituency, and across Scotland, families are desperately struggling to access NHS dental treatment. Public Health Scotland figures show that while 87% of children are registered, only about 66 have actually been seen by an NHS dentist in the past 2 years. And in our most deprived areas, that drops to only 1 in 2 children. This despite the SNP claiming that 95% of children are registered with an NHS dentist. When routine care disappears, the consequences land in hospitals. Before the pandemic, Scotland was admitting about 8,000 children a year for dental extractions under general anaesthetic, the single biggest cause of planned childhood admissions to hospitals. Despite the clear and dire consequences of failing to address dental health and health inequalities in general, the governments in both Holyrood and Westminster appear to be looking the other way. A recent survey from the British Dental Association highlighted the financial strain faced by dentists, with 45% of practices saying they were struggling to stay financially viable, and over half saying that the recent budget had accelerated their move into the private sector. It's with this in mind that we must ask why this government chose to follow through on its national insurance rise for primary care providers like dentists. It appears that while in their manifesto they support local health providers, the reality for those providing care is quite different. I would therefore like to join my Liberal Democrat colleagues in calling for the government to reconsider its stance on national insurance. Failing to return national insurance contributions to their former levels will inevitably result in fewer NHS dental appointments, fewer NHS dental providers, and more children on operating tables. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Is there a better metaphor for the state of this country than the state of dentistry? 14 years of neglect left us with a decayed system of the NHS provision, with those able to pay only those protected. And I see it myself with wards full of children with abscesses at the weekend, dental abscesses. Now, residents have told me stories of searching for NHS dental provision that simply doesn't exist. So, in my own constituency of Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, the number of urgent appointments has in fact increased by 35%, with practices providing urgent dental care services 7 days a week and into the evenings, and there are more coming soon. So the government is making a serious attempt to deal with this decades of decay and drift. But we must go further. We don't have enough dentists. We don't have enough dental service providers. So let's sort out the dental contract, as we've been hearing before. And the honourable member from South Wiltshire, no longer in his seat, is quite right that the NHS dentists are, in fact, heroes. Absolutely.
Very grateful for giving way. The point has been made repeatedly that you can earn a lot more money in private practice than you can in NHS dentistry, and that's unlikely to change no matter what the renegotiation is. So would he agree with me that the last government's review into requiring the £300,000 roughly cost of training a dentist should require a number of years working for the NHS afterwards?
I thank my honourable member for his intervention, and that is certainly a suggestion that should be investigated. Now, we must increase the number of dentists. We only have 24 dentists for every 100,000 people in the east of England. We need to increase the number of training providers and training places. But to open a dental school, it'll take ages for there to be new dentists. Now, one suggestion is that we sort out the dental accreditation system. Members may not know that there are only 600 opportunities to take the accreditation exam each year, but there are 6,000 people who are planning to take this exam. That'll take them 10 years. We must get the General Dental Council to increase the number of exam opportunities. So we've begun addressing this political emergencies, but we must go further, forwards, with a clear and fair offer, focusing on what the Minister described as the triangle: patients, practitioners and the public purse, providing a service that ensures we give excellent available care for all, including prevention, especially for the most vulnerable, and in a way we can pay for it. NHS dentistry can be saved. Let's have a sign on the door: urgent NHS dental appointments available here. Now, wouldn't that be great?
Come to the Liberal Democrat front benches, Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable member from Grimsby for securing this really important debate today. Before I was elected, Madam Deputy Speaker, I drove around Winchester, the Meon Valley and the beautiful New Forest, treating horses as a veterinary surgeon, and a key regular part of that role is regular dental treatment. And horses don't like going to the dentist any more than humans do. They need their teeth rasped every 6 months, or maybe at least every year, or they get ulcers in their mouth, they can get infected tooth roots. And when you have to remove a tooth that has got a root of 3 inches long, and especially on a hot day like today, you work up a sweat, it takes a long time, but it's really painful for the horse. We use painkillers, we use nerve blocks, but it's painful for the horse. It's often avoidable if they'd had the regular dental treatment, and it costs the owner a lot more money. And it's exactly the same with human medicine as well. There's cross-party agreement. No one disputes that prevention is better than cure. And when it comes to dental care in the NHS, we're failing at even the most basic level of public health. I'm not going to go through all the stats that honourable members have all repeated about the numbers of children needing general anaesthetics for dental care. I will happily do that.
Gentleman giving way. Would you welcome then the government's partnership with Colgate on toothbrushing in schools so that we can tackle prevention with children, making sure they're not going into hospital with tooth decay because they are brushing their teeth and learning how to do so properly? Thank you.
Absolutely welcome that. I think is a fantastic initiative. I visited 2 dental practices in Winchester, Madam Deputy Speaker, and both told me exactly the same thing. They want to do more NHS work. They want to be there for their communities. But because of the current NHS dental contract, they simply can't make it financially viable. They are effectively subsidising the NHS patients with income from private work. And the British Dental Association estimates that private dentistry in England cross-subsidise the NHS care to the tune of £332 million a year, which is due to rise to £425 million if NHS practices are not offered any help with the tens of thousands of additional staff costs brought in by the increase in national insurance. NHS work, they do perform. They don't have time to do the education that they want to do. You know, people want to do proactive, holistic healthcare, but they're having to get people through in such a quick turnaround. Let me say this clearly. Dentists are not the problem. They're doing their best within a contract that is outdated and damaging. I also want to speak to something that is often overlooked in this conversation, and that is oral health is not just about teeth. Now, I know my dental colleagues, the same as in veterinary practice, we routinely identify serious conditions like oral cancers, squamous cell carcinomas during routine dental checks. These cancers are often aggressive. If spotted early, they can be treated. And we also know that infections in the mouth can lead to things like endocarditis. This is not a trivial condition. There's good evidence that periodontitis can contribute to the onset of dementia. So how many cancers are we missing? How many heart problems are we not avoiding by not having routine dental checks? So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll sum up now, as I know we're pushed for time. But in summary, the Liberal Democrats, we're going to continue to fight tooth and nail for an NHS that includes dentistry. I did manage to avoid making any jokes about equine dentistry and straight from the horse's mouth. Members will be glad to hear. But we don't want NHS dentistry to be an afterthought. It's got to be a core part of a truly universal, holistic health service, because everyone deserves access to routine dental care. Many members have said they live in areas that are dental deserts, where NHS dentists are more rare than hen's teeth. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's clear we have cross-party consensus. Let's get this dental contract reformed, and let's make this Parliament the last Parliament that anyone has to extract their own teeth.
Shadow Minister, Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate the Honourable Lady for Greater Grimsby for securing this debate today. Dentistry is very important. Dentists don't just deal with your teeth, they deal with your mouth, your gums. They identify physical diseases, including cancer, and prevent sepsis. Last month, I visited the dental design studio in Sleaford to celebrate their 20th anniversary of great dentistry and met some fabulous committed professionals. Somewhat unexpectedly, given the venue, I was asked to help judge a cake competition. And honourable members my dentist will be pleased to know I brush my teeth very well afterwards. Access to NHS dentistry has been a problem for a very long time. When I moved house in 2001, there was no NHS dentist available, and I travelled 2 hours to Redcar to see the wonderful dentist Mr Dixon for many years until he retired, and then after that there was no dentist at all. So are we short of dentists? Well, we're not short of dentists. The Conservative government increased the number of new training places, the number of new dentists, and although the population increased, there is still more per capita than in 2010. As the Minister for Care has said, the issue is not the number of dentists, but the number of paucity of dentists doing NHS work. Though I would encourage the Minister to consider more dental places, because we see that 1 in 15 of the youngsters who want to become a dentist are turned away, and as such, they go overseas to train or they train to do something else. And I wonder if she could commit not just to a dental school in Norwich, but in other underserved areas such as Lincoln. The main problem, as many has identified, is the 2006 contract with the UDA bans for procedures. There are several issues with this. 1, the amounts vary between practices based on historical volume data. 2, there is a disincentive to treat new or high-need patients. And 3, that the UDA simply don't cover all the costs. The Conservatives did improve this a little bit with ironing out some of the bizarre UDA contract terms and a new higher floor for minimum UDAs. But there is much more to do, as we've heard today, to reform it completely. However, how are the government getting on with this? Could the Minister give us an update, please? Because the Public Accounts Committee notes that NHSE and DHSE do not yet know what reform might look like or on what timescale it can be delivered, beyond a vague assertion that some reform is imminent. I won't give way because there is not much time at all. I met with Eddie Crouch from BDA recently, who talked about the national insurance costs, because before even today's announced pay rise, dental practices were facing 9.5% increase in staff costs, again pushing more further to private practice. Will the Minister ask the Chancellor to exempt NHS dentists from the National Insurance contribution rise? There's also been discussion about compelling dentists to work a proportion of their work in the NHS, either by compelling new dentists that are newly trained or by incentivising with the use of student loan repayments. Has the government considered this? We have many overseas trained dentists. Some are British students who are trained overseas, some are foreign nationals. But the ORE exam, the Overseas Registration Exam, has 2,000 people on their waiting list. And for those who pass, somewhat bizarrely, they can work in the private sector, but not the NHS without supervision. This seems somewhat incoherent. Does the government have confidence in this exam or not? It is illogical to allow a person to practice as a private dentist but not practice dentistry on their NHS neighbour. It is also a clear disincentive to NHS practice. So what good discussions has the government had with the General Dental Council about this issue? My honourable friend, the member for Herne Bay and Sandwich, has repeatedly raised the issue of Ukrainian dentists. There are 200 Ukrainian dentists in the UK. Why not assess them and enable them to work? It's better for them and it's better for us. Dentists form as part of a team of hygienists, nurses, technicians, therapists and a wider team. What is the government doing to help each of those practice at the top of their skills range to provide greater dental care? What is the government doing to support rural areas since it's cancelled the mobile dental vans? What is it doing to ensure that it delivers the 700,000 a year promised appointments, since it has delivered hardly any of them so far? I will conclude my remarks. I won't give way because I know there's very little time indeed. But what I would say is that we can all see, it's been very clear today, that the NHS is currently not fit for purpose when it comes to dentistry. The government need to get a grip of this and get a grip of it soon.
Minister Karen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I really couldn't have asked for a better setup to the end of this debate. I'd like to really thank the Honourable Lady opposite. But first of all, really pay great tribute to my friend, the member for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes. It's an issue she's pursued for some time, and I'm grateful for her bringing this important debate. I know many people would have liked to speak more. I'm going to try and get through in a very short time. I've got to respond. I won't take any interventions. I want to try and address some of the questions that were raised, because this issue continues to be a matter of really great concern to members and all of our constituents alike, because poor oral health can have a devastating effect on individuals, as we've heard, impacting on their mental and physical health alike, and indeed their opportunities for work, as my friend the Honourable for Lee and Atherton made clear. Yet it is largely a preventable issue. Through good oral health hygiene and regular visits to a dentist, we inherited a broken NHS dental system, and our ambition is to rescue and restore NHS dentistry so that we deliver more NHS dental care to those who need it. 14 years of neglect, cuts and incompetence by the previous government have left NHS dentistry in a state of decay. This is simply unacceptable and it needs to change, which it will. As of March 2024, there are more than 36,000 dentists registered with the General Dental Council in England, and less than 11,000 full-time equivalent dentists were working in the NHS. As Lord Darcy said in his report, there are enough dentists in England, just not enough dentists willing to do NHS work. And that's why it's clear that this government will be taking stronger action. We are prepared to take that action. Since coming into office, we are making good progress on our plan for change. We have already taken action to address the immediate needs of patients in pain, requiring urgent dental care through our manifesto commitment to deliver an additional 700,000 urgent dental appointments per year. ICB started to deliver these appointments from April, and each area has been given expectations for delivery based on their local needs. That point noted by my honourable friend for Filton and Bradley Stoke and for Amber Valley, who have both campaigned studiously in opposition and are continuing to take that to this House. ICBs have returned detailed plans for delivering against these expectations, and my honourable friend, the member for Aberafan and my state, the Minister, is holding regular meetings with officials in the department and with NHS England to monitor and drive progress against these plans. And I commend my friend from Gloucester for pursuing this with his ICB. That is exactly the right thing to do. To have truly effective dental system, we cannot focus just on those that are already in pain. We must have a system that prioritises prevention, particularly for children. A point articulate, well made by my friend for North Ayrshire and Arran, Blackpool South and Morecambe and Lonsdale. That's why we've invested over £11 million to roll out a national supervised programme for 3 to 5-year-olds. This will reach up to 600,000 children a year in the most deprived areas of England. Alongside this, we've launched the innovative partnership with Colgate-Palmolive, who are donating more than 23 million toothbrushes and toothpaste over the next 5 years. This is incredible value for the taxpayer
taxpayer and a fantastic example of how businesses and government can work together for the public good. We've also taken the decision to expand community water fluoridation across the northeast of England. This is the first expansion for decades and will bring benefits to an additional 1.6 million people in the region. Our workforce is crucial, as we've heard this afternoon. A strong dentistry system needs a strong workforce, and we recognise the incredible work that dentists and dental professionals do. And I pay tribute also to Mr Dobransky from Leeds. What an amazing service. I can also mention my own dentist, Aidan Moran, who's been seeing me now for the best part of 3 decades. A central part of our 10-year health plan will be our workforce and how we ensure we train and provide the staff, technology and infrastructure the NHS needs to care for patients across our communities, a point well made by my friend, the member for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket. We will publish that refreshed workforce plan to ensure the NHS has the right people in the right places with the right skills to deliver the care that people need. Now, we are sadly all familiar with the term dental deserts, as highlighted by my friend, the member for South Norfolk, to describe areas of the country where access is particularly difficult, and we are continuing to support ICBs through the Golden Hello scheme. But of course, dentists are only one part of the team. Therapists, hygienists, nurses and technicians all play an important role, and we need to make sure the NHS is a better place to work for all of them. Mr Speaker, we are committed to fundamentally reforming the contract. It could have been done earlier. It could have been done at any point over the last 14 years by the Coalition or the Tories, but they left it for us to do. It will take time, but I can assure everybody here that the development of these proposals is well underway. We're continuing to work with the British Dental Association and other representatives to deliver our shared ambition for treatments. And I know my friend, the Minister, the member for Aberystwyth and Eisteddfod, has met the BDA recently and is having a productive relationship with them. In the spirit of honesty, as outlined earlier, let's be clear, there are no perfect payment models, and careful consideration needs to be given to any changes to the complex dental system so that we deliver genuine improvements for patients and the profession. It is an immense challenge. There are no quick fixes and no easy answers, but people across the country deserve better access, and we're determined to make that happen. Mr Speaker, finally, we know we must deal with this immediate crisis. That's why we will deliver those extra 700,000 extra appointments each year. We will get more dentists into the communities that need them most and make sure that everyone who needs an NHS dentist can get one. Rescuing NHS dentistry will not happen overnight. It will take time, investment and reform. But improving access to NHS dentistry is key to our mission to get the NHS back on its feet and fit for the future.
Melanie.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'm so grateful for the number of people who participated in the debate, and I can only apologise for the people who weren't able to get in and the shortened time that people had to contribute. And I thank the Minister for her comprehensive response today. I think it's very clear that we have got some way to go before we get the kind of service that people across the whole country in each of our constituencies really deserve. But I'm absolutely confident that the Minister will take this forward, hearing all of the suggestions and comments that have been made this afternoon. So thank you very much.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Let the front benches change it.